this is where we came up from the ground. In other words, we were birthed into this place, just like we are all birthed by our mother.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Atheist Apostate. This is your host, the AA, and we are back here with another episode on the LDS Mormon Church and their Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon that they claim is divine scripture and revelation given to Joseph Smith directly via golden plates that he supposedly discovered in the Hill Cumorah. And we're not going to get into any of this because there's a lot more. We're going to get into this in the LDS history. But within the Book of Mormon, we have certain claims that are made. And we do. And one of the things we're going to be looking at here is the CES letters. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use Jim Bennett's rebuttal. Yes, I'm going over to Jim Bennett's rebuttal. And we are going to, this is his page right over here, and we are going to look at some claims that the CES letters makes, because one, I have seen rebuttals outside of Jim on Saint Unscripted and Book of Mormon Central making some certain claims here about the CES letters claims, and that they were only new and recent. Some of the stuff in here is more than new and recent. It goes back 100 and some years. I left the church about 10, 11 years before the CES letters ever came online. Jeremy, the writer of it, was probably still watching G.I. Joe or, Nickelodeon and eating cereal in his underwear at the living room table. So he was probably like 6, 7 years old when I left the church. So yes, this is not stuff that's just new. This is stuff that has been around for a while. So, and one of the things that Jeremy brings up here, and we're going to cover, so we're going to be covering it because this is a huge thing, and the Book of Mormon has changed its introduction page. Yes, it has. DNA analysis 10 has concluded that Native American Indians do not originate from the Middle East or from Israelites, but rather from Asia. Do you guys see that? The church knows this now, and shortly after the church could no longer defend their stance, in 2006 they changed the cover letter, and we will look at it, or the cover letter, the introduction page. I've got a pre-2006 edition of the Book of Mormon. I have taken a picture of it. I have put it up there. You can go. I will place the LDS scripture link in the bottom right here too, so you can see the change for yourself. If you have a pre-2006 edition of the Book of Mormon, you can open up your Book of Mormon to the introduction page and see what we're talking about. So it's coming up here in a second. So this is going to be what we're talking about here that you can verify. So the church no longer denies that the ancestors of the Lamanites, or the principal ancestors of the Lamanites, are the Native American, South, and Central Americans. They only claim they are a remnant. That's still incorrect, even if we want to go that way, because we're going to see. We are going to see. First, we saw a Native American member, a band council member, talking as we opened this video. They know what's about to happen here. They are aware of their history, their ancestry, and their legends. We have in the LDS Church the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon makes several claims. They claim 3 people came over from the ancient Middle East before the times of Jesus, so before the Christian era, CE. I will refer to the before Christian era as BCE, before Christian era. I'm going to call the Christian era CE, not AD, because I'm an atheist. I don't accept Jesus as my Christ and Savior. Jews don't, Muslims don't, Jews still go by the old calendar. So anyhow, Book of Mormon people come over in 3 waves. Tower of Babel wave with the Jaredites, over approximately 500 BC, we get the Mulekites and Lehi's family, which gives us the Lamanites and the Nephites, which are all going to be characters. Let's hear what the Book of Mormon has to say on some of these characters here.
His brothers were righteous men who lived in a city called Babel. They lived hundreds of years before the Nephites. The Lord told the brothers...
Okay, and quickly, this is the Jaredites. So this is the Jaredite people, the first to come over here. And we're going to stop and talk about this in a second.
...brother of Jared to gather his family and friends and leave the land. They took their animals and all kinds of seeds with them. The Lord said he...
And do you hear that? They took their animals and their seeds. So their animals and their seeds. And what do we see over here, ladies and gentlemen? We see a donkey, an ass. We see a donkey. We see sheep. So we see donkeys. We see sheep. Donkeys and sheep are not native to the Americas. They are post-Columbian, which means after the Spanish came here, after the time of Christopher Columbus. They're post-Columbian, not pre-Columbian, what we call in history pre-Columbian, pre-Christopher Columbus. So, and we will talk about this later on, because the church has claims in here that there's certain stuff that was here and it's not, and we get a response why.
He would lead the Jaredites to a promised land. The Jaredites caught birds and fish to take with them. They took swarms of honeybees. The Jaredites traveled in the wilderness.
Okay, there's going to be a common theme here as you're meeting the Book of Mormon characters. I call them characters because that's all they are to me. So every single one of them travels through the wilderness before they come over across the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, to get here. So this is a common theme.
The Lord spoke to them from a cloud and told them which way to go. When the Jaredites got to the seashore, they put up their tents. They stayed by the sea for 4 years.
Oh, and this is another common theme right here. This is another common theme. Travel in the wilderness, set up for a few years on the coast before they travel, which is, assuming it takes them several years to build a boat. Don't know why. It only used to take a month or so, a few months at most, for the ancients to build a large vessel. So I don't understand why God always made his people that were coming to the Americas, the Jaredites, Mulekites, and Lehi's family, always stop for a few years, show himself in a cloud like he did to Moses. They're basically giving you the Exodus story. Yes, they give you the Exodus story 3 times. Sorry, I didn't want to make it obvious, but just in case you missed it. Exodus story. Travel in the wilderness. The Jews traveled in the wilderness for 40 years. They pitched their tents. God talked to them in a burning bush cloud. Coincidence?
The Lord was pleased with Lehi.
Oh, and now we're getting into Lehi's family. I'm leaving the Mulekites last because they're the least talked about, but we're going to get to those people in a second and back to DNA. But first we have to hear the LDS version of what they claim, not my version of what they claim. They're straight from their mouth, and this is Book of Mormon Central I'm using. Link down here in the description.
And one night spoke to him in a dream. He told Lehi to take his family and leave Jerusalem. Lehi obeyed the Lord.
And Lehi, well, why am I switching over here? So, and Lehi took his family into the wilderness and for several years, and they stayed by the ocean for a while they built a boat for a few years, and then sailed across here, and this is where we're getting.
According to the Book of Mormon, Lehi and his family traveled across the ocean and landed in the New World.
Lehi's family packed food and tents. They left their house and their gold and silver and traveled into the wilderness.
See, they left their gold and their silver and they traveled into the wilderness just like the Jaredites. So you heard them say they pitched tents. The Exodus story twice over here.
The Lord promised Nephi that he would be blessed because of his faith.
Yes, I'm going to stop here. As you know, I like to stop. Mormonism faces 2 problems here. Not just what we're dealing with. I left out the other problem because I didn't want this being a 3-hour video. One of the problems that they face is Lehi is told that he's going to give a land of promise that had no inhabitants before them. They would gain a fresh land with no other inhabitants before them. So Mormons, you know this. So non-Mormons and investigators, LDS members were taught this, at least my generation and before. So they faced a problem because when they get to the land, there's this group called the Jaredites that we already met. So, and they came over here at the confounding of languages during the Tower of Babel, 2,500 years before the Christian era. Approximately 2,500 years. 22 to 25 is the consensus. Important. Because if the Jaredites came over here, then how were Nephi and his family under Lehi supposed to come to a land never inherited before that's being promised to them? So that's always been a contradiction. We won't really get into that this video. Second issue is the Jaredites are told the same thing. They're going to be given a land of promise never inhabited before, and if they keep God's commandments, they'll prosper. That is Mormonism 101 for the Book of Mormon. Now the Mormon narrative is no longer that the Native Americans are the sole principal ancestors. Now they are amongst the descendants, and we're going to get to that in a second, back to LDS Fair and the CES letters very soon. But it's all important, because if both groups were told they're going to be given a land of inheritance never inherited before, a promised land never inherited before, how do they go from the sole principal ancestors of the Native and South Central Americans, so to the only being amongst a remnant amongst many? So that's the new narrative. They are ones amongst many, and that is a contradiction. So let's get back to Lehi and his family.
He would become a leader over his brothers.
Nephi.
The ship carrying Lehi's family crossed the ocean and arrived at the promised land. The
Book of Mormon stories that my teacher told to me, all about the Lamanites of ancient history. Yes, I can't sing, but that is Book of Mormon stories. So that we were taught, and they came across the sea, get this land, if you will, righteously. Go look up the song for Book of Mormon stories.
people set up their tents.
After some time, Nephi and all those who would go with him fled into the wilderness.
Okay, this is pretty small, so let's go over here. This is, again, from Book of Mormon Central, and this is what they're talking about. So let's go back here just a smidget. And what they're talking about, really quick, is now that we've left the land of the Middle East, and they're going down and around the Arabian Peninsula into the Southern Sea, into the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, into the Atlantic, because that's how they would have had to go by their thing. They had to go all the way down and around Africa and across. So if they went that way, opposite than what we'll see the other group at the time leaving did. So, but now they're landing in what the church believes they landed in Mesoamerica, unless you're a Heartland theorist. If you're a Heartland model proponent, then you guys are saying Florida. The church officially says Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica. So, and quickly, just so you guys understand, Mesoamerica, Meso is Greek for middle. So Middle America, Mesoamerica, Middle America, Mexico down to Guatemala area, in between North and South America.
Fled into the wilderness and established the city Nephi. Later, the Nephites traveled northward and found the city of Zarahemla, which was already occupied by the Mulekites.
Okay. So here we come to group number 3, the Mulekites. Who were these Mulekites? So this is where Book of Mormon history and Smith starts getting carried away, and Smith got too fanciful, and Joseph couldn't keep track in his own head, his own historical chronological order. So I'm not going to make this much bigger. I'm just going to play. So here is our third group.
Most readers of the Book of Mormon are familiar with the Nephites and the Lamanites, but sometimes it's easy to forget about the Mulekites.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy to forget because the story's murky.
And the important role that they played. Their identity is not immediately clear in the text.
Yes, it is immediately clear in the text. Okay, I can't get this much bigger here for you guys, but the link is down in the description. Link is down in the description for this. This is coming from Fair's own page. We know who the Jaredites are. This group left the Tower of Babel and arrived in the Americas about 22 BC. They flourished until about 600 BC when wars destroyed everyone but Coriantumr. So see Ether 115. Coriantumr is going to be the problem. Coriantumr is a person who was a Jaredite. So, and he was the last Jaredite king and a false prophet and an evil man according to the Book of Mormon. So he was a very evil man, and we'll hear more about him. So, and I'm going to get more on this contradiction, but Coriantumr is also the name of a Mulekite city, one of the first cities. So is Zarahemla. So remember that. Jaredite's last king and their false prophet is Coriantumr. The Jaredites who came over, they say 2200 BC. The church says 2200 BC. So, okay guys, so I decided to go over to the website here itself. I got the link. That's what I did, is I went down to the link I have in my notes that I'll be posting. That by now you'll have it down in the bottom. So this is the timeline that I have in the video I put in. So as you can see, they left the tower. We know about the Mulekites because here it is. Mulekites. Mulek, a son of King Zedekiah. King Zedekiah was under Nebuchadnezzar, who was ruling under the Babylonians at the time Lehi's family left. We'll see this in a second. Led a group from Jerusalem for about 587 BC, and they came to the Americas and they founded Coriantumr. See, they founded Coriantumr. I'm not saying it. The church is saying it. So, and that's in Omni 1421. Omni 1421 will be down in the description. Omni's in the description. Let's go back up here for a second. What did they say? When war was destroyed, everyone but Coriantumr survived. Okay, so Coriantumr, what's a Jaredite doing with a Mulekite name? And there's a problem with that. What's the problem? They flourished, the Jaredites, until about 600 BC. Do you guys get that? 600 BC. They flourished. The end of their civilization, according to the Book of Mormon and Moroni and Mormon, the two claimed prophets and historians abridged in this compilation, says they flourished until about 600 BC. The Mulekites arrived to the Americas around 587 BC. Let that sink in. They came over approximately 3 years later. They brought down a little small group, brought down a civilization that was here for over 1,000 years. If they came in 2200, according to the Book of Mormon, and our other group comes around 600, that's about a 12 to 1400 year period that the Jaredites were here. So in 3 years, the Mulekites come over. We're going to hear more about these guys. They come over to this land. They take out the Jaredites, who happen to have a leader who was named Coriantumr as well, and the Mulekites named a city Coriantumr. Joseph Smith lost where he was in his writing. He didn't have great notes. His scribes weren't taking great notes, obviously. He got lost. He got confused, and he fucked up. Plain and simple, he fucked up. So, excuse my language, but that's what it is, because there's no way a Jaredite can be named Coriantumr. So, and 3 years later, a group they have no clue about comes over, and they found a city and named it Coriantumr as well? Yeah, not logical. Not rational. Big problem there. But that's not even the biggest part of it. But that is a problem. You cannot say it is or not. True or false, that is a problem. How can a guy be named after a Mulekite city when the Mulekites weren't even here yet? So let's just quickly go back over here and meet our new group. We've already met Lehi's group that's known as the Nephites. They left Jerusalem about 600 BC and came to the Americas. Gradually, his prosperity became divided. So that's where we get the Nephites and the Lamanites. Lehi's son, Laman and Lamuel, the Lamanites. Lehi's son, Nephi, the Nephites, and his other son, Samuel, the Nephites. So they came over at the same time as the Mulekites. So let's hear more about these Mulekites. So I left this up here a little bit longer for you guys to try to actually...
Leaders are introduced to the Mulekites, who are also called the people of Zarahemla, when the Nephites discovered them and absorbed them into their community.
So Book of Mormon Central and the church, they're both in agreement. Oops. Book of Mormon Central and the church. I'm trying to do a different way by putting the video up here at the same time as I'm on here. Are in harmony with one another. There's no disagreement with this. The Nephites came, they discovered the Mulekites' city of Zarahemla. So I don't know how, because this is another contradictory problem we're facing right here. It is. So we heard the Nephites came over, Lehi's family, at the same time as the Mulekites. They came over within a few years difference. We know that. We're told by that by the church. Down there in the description. Down there in the description. Right here. Right here. Nephites, about 600 BC. Mulekites, about 587 BC. That's a 3-year difference approximately. So are you seriously telling me that in the 3 years they went from small little groups who traveled on one boat to founding a great friggin' city where thousands are going to die in a battle against Coriantumr of the Jaredites, who happens to be named after a city that's only founded within 3 years of the time that they get assimilated into the Nephites? Stop and think. Stop and think. Does that make logical and rational sense in any which way? This wasn't the CES letters telling me this. I discovered this 10, 11 years before CES letters came out, guys. This is what I'm saying. This has been a problem of contention to the church for decades. Not even decades, for over a century. This has been a problem for the church with historians and biblical scholars. Timelines do not match up. Joseph Smith got fanciful. He took from the view of the Hebrews the core concept of the book, and he started building his own book from that. And he got lost and confused the further he got into it. That is an error. I'm not even going to pick on a lot of the other errors. We're only going to cover a few things. But do you guys see the first part of this? We've got a huge hole that cannot be reconciled here. The Mulekites and the Nephites, the Lamanites, could have not come over at the same time and then met each other within a few years later, and the Mulekites already have a huge ass city with hundreds of thousands of people. Impossible. Illogical, irrationally impossible. So to have a city they found, the Mulekites, called Coriantumr, and then to have a Jaredite leader, the last of their leaders, because they're taken out by the Mulekites, and his name happens to be Coriantumr? Not possible. Well, I guess it is, but what's the one out of how many hundreds of millions? The rationality and logic behind it breaks down. It's not possible. Let's go hear more about this group.
The Book of Mormon states that they came out from Jerusalem at the time that Zedekiah, king of Judah, was carried away captive into Babylon. This would mean that they left Jerusalem about the same time as Lehi's group.
Yep, they left about the same time as Lehi's group. Let's actually go just back 10 seconds here. And I'm going to switch back over here. So, behold, it came to pass that Messiah discovered the people of Zarahemla. Messiah is one of the Mormon prophets, Book of Mormon prophets. So came out from Jerusalem, the people of Zarahemla, who came out at the time of Zedekiah, king of Judea, who was carried away captive into Babylon.
They came out from Jerusalem at the time that Zedekiah, king of Judah, was carried away captive into Babylon. This would mean...
Okay. Let's watch the wave here. First wave, this is Mulekites. They are coming through the Mediterranean Sea and out through the Sea of the passage of Gibraltar into the Atlantic Ocean.
That they left Jerusalem about the same time as
at about the same time as Lehi's family, who goes through the Arabian Peninsula. See, that's the Arabian Peninsula, so that means they have to go into the Indian Ocean. They'd have to go all the way around and travel to the, so this is the, this is the Book of Mormon claim. This is Book of Mormon Central. Book of Mormon Central, and this is Book of Mormon, or LDS View, 2.
Lehi's group. We learn that Zarahemla was a descendant of Mulek and those who came with him into the wilderness.
Okay, do we see this, guys? Do we see this? This should be small, big enough for you guys to see. The city of Zarahemla. Let's stop here and think logically, rationally, and go in steps. We're told Lehi's family comes and finds the city of Lehi, and they travel north, and they find Zarahemla and a people there called the Mulekites. So, okay, Zarahemla is named after a guy, Zarahemla, and the city's named after him. That's where they get the name, and that's why they say Zarahemla, right here, Zarahemla, so is the son of Mulek. Just so we have Zarahemla, son of Mulek. Son of Mulek. So that means the Mulekites who came over at the same time as the Mulekites who came over at the same time period. The same time period as the Lehi's family who discovered them in the New World. And it will have took the Lehi's family longer to get here because they went through a different route that took us longer. So they went through the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula over here, all the way down, and what came over, and that's why the Heartlanders believe they came up here into Florida, so not into Mesoamerica, because they're saying Mesoamerica in the Panhandle. They're showing the Book of Mormon on here, down in South America, not even in Mesoamerica. They're showing it over here in South America. Notice this, they're showing it in South America. So, and jumping. So yeah, they got Zarahemla here, but if you look at the other map when they showed it, they had in South America. And we'll see that map again soon, and we're going to show. They don't even have the same map showing. Zarahemla, son of Mulek, and let's see what else they say. Son of Mulek.
Yet not until much later do readers learn that Mulek was actually the son of Zedekiah, the king of Judah, and that he...
Oh, okay, so he's Zedekiah's son. We know a lot. We just heard before we got into this, we don't know anything about the Jaredites. We don't know anything about the Mulekites. Yeah, we do. The church has given us a lot of information. They're telling us about them. So how can we not know about them?
Was Zedekiah's only son who wasn't slain when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians. One reason the Mulekites are important is that they help settle the fundamental conflict between the Nephites and Lamanites.
But that's where we have even more problems, and Joseph Smith, gets fanciful. Because we were just told that the Lamanites, or the Nephites, assimilated. We got told earlier in this video that they were assimilated into the Nephites. The Mulekites were assimilated into the Nephites. So how were they instrumental in helping the Nephites and the Lamanites at times settle conflicts when they were first assimilated? Breakdown number 3. Breakdown number 1. So then we have 3 right now. Breakdown number, we got 4. So if we want to go both groups, Jaredites and Lehi's family were supposed to get a land of never inherited. 2, contradiction. So issue of source. We have the Mulekites finding the city of Coriantumr, and we had the Jaredite destruction by the Mulekites, and the last Jaredite king's name happens to be Coriantumr. Can't happen. Well, it could, but the possibilities are slimmer than freaking slim. Like slim. So number 3 is we have the time frames of 2 families coming over, and the Lehi's family discovering the Nephites discovering Zarahemla. So discovering Zarahemla, a city already built, established with hundreds of thousands of people there. Zarahemla, the son of Mulek. So who they took out the Jaredites. So problem number 4, now we have problem number 4. And this is this one right here, is if the Nephites assimilated the Mulekites into their culture, like we got just told a few minutes ago in this video by Book of Mormon Central, then how could they help dispute problems between the Lamanites and the Nephites on occasions when they were assimilated in. Do you understand the problems? We got 4 problems without even getting into archaeological or not geography, agriculture and animals, husbandry.
In the Book of Mormon, the entire Book of Mormon lands are located between the Sea East and the Sea West.
Okay, see, and in here, if we're going to go, this could be part of Mesoamerica, but we're still getting thrown down here into South America. This is still South America traveling up into Mesoamerica.
From the land Nephi, which is the southernmost point of Book of Mormon lands, to the land northward, the northernmost part of Book of Mormon lands, we have the East and West Sea bordering on the left and right.
The Lord said the people who live in the promised land must serve God, or they will be destroyed.
And this is a big premises, is if they don't listen to God, they'll be destroyed. And the Lamanites didn't listen to God. They rebelled from Nephi's being a prophet, and their skin was turned darkened, and that's why they are the native South and Central Americans.
Jaredites grew in number and became rich. They chose a king to be their leader.
Okay, and this is me confirming. This is Coriantenor. This isn't me telling you guys stuff and just reading little things. Here is a Coriantenor, a Jaredite king. The Jaredites were taken out by the Mulekites shortly after they got here. Don't know how. The rationality behind that just is... the fallacy of it is a joke.
Many years passed and the Jaredites became wicked.
Many years passed and the Jaredites became wicked. Well, many years couldn't. How many is many? Do we want to play semantics and do with numbers? But it's implied a long time went by, because it's only really 3 years. They were approximately 600 BC. They were destroyed by the Mulekites, who got over there 587-ish, roughly. So, because it doesn't take years to cross the ocean, it only takes a few months at the most to cross the ocean. So, and I have this all broken down. So everything that I've gone over here, here's the chart of the 3 groups, so we know who the groups are. Zarahemla is a descendant of Mulek. Mulek, the son and king of Zedekiah, led a group in 587 from Jerusalem, so they founded Coriantenor. So the Jaredites flourished until about 600 BC, when wars destroyed everyone but Coriantenor. Not the city Coriantenor, the last king of the Jaredites, also name of a false prophet. They call him a false prophet. Why is a Jaredite named after a Mulekite city? Mulekites did find Coriantenor. We've got that. The church doesn't deny it. We've just heard it directly from the church. So let's go into that circle of what's not working here. So what's not working here? It says the Mulekites, and we're going here. This is the group between the Jaredites and the Mulekites. Mulekites defeat Jaredites at Coriantenor. So not even at Zarahemla, at Coriantenor. Zarahemla was the last battle. So this is one of the major defeats. They took off, and then they fought another battle, the last battle at the hill Cumorah, and that's where Moroni, and we won't get into that. That's a different episode. So a small group took a larger group out. Events in the timeline do not line up. They do not line up. So we know that these guys here, the Jaredites, left 1600 years, and I will have the links down here. So we know that they left at the same time. Lehi, and the Nephites and the Mulekites left at the same time frame. So they both get to the land different times. So, and in a few short years of travel, when one gets there from the other, not even a few years. So then they end up encountering a city with hundreds of thousands when only a small little group left a few years before them. It doesn't work, guys. It doesn't. Let's just listen to the logical fallacy and the reasonings behind the church's explanations, and they break down.
Ether told the Jaredites that if they would believe in God, they would someday live with Heavenly Father in a better world. The Lord sent Ether to Coriantenor, who was a wicked Jaredite king. Ether told him to repent, or he would live to see all his people killed.
I'm not saying it. This is the church's doctrine.
The Jaredites fought until Coriantenor and Shiz were the only ones left. When Shiz fainted from losing so much blood, Coriantumr cut off his head. Ether's prophecy had come true.
Oh, poor Shiv, man. I wonder if that's where I got shivved, man. I wonder if that's where that came from.
Coriantumr was the last Jaredite alive. He was found by the people of Zarahemla.
So Coriantumr was the last of the Jaredites. So the last of the Jaredites. Well, what was Ether then? So...
Ether finished writing the history of the Jaredites. They had been destroyed because of their wickedness.
So the Jaredites were destroyed and no more ceased to exist according to the LDS Church, not according to the AA.
Jaredite records were later found by the Nephites.
The General Conference of 1929 said, "We must be careful in the conclusions that we reach. The Book of Mormon teaches the history of 3 distinct people."
3 distinct people. We should be careful of the conclusions we come to, because we just don't know the church say. We know that scriptures are true, we take the words for them, but we don't take their geography and how they tell, where we are, and we'll get more into that. We're going to get more into that, but, you gotta be careful what you take and what you don't take. Just take what's going to support what we claim, which is the doctrine and the gospel, and what we claim is authentic, wording, but don't rely on the geography, because they really don't know their geography, even though they've been there for a while. No, because it breaks down, because Joseph Smith was trying to merge too much together and was not learned enough to pull it off. And this is how we know he wasn't learned enough to pull it off, because it breaks down. My 4 points before we even get into the meat of this breaks down.
2 peoples and 3 different colonies of people who came from the old world to this continent.
I also have my own sense of what that story might be using science.
Yes, science tells us something different. And now we're getting into the CES letter claim of the principal ancestors of the Native Americans is what the first, and let's go back over here. This is from the CES Letters Rebuttal from Jim Bennett. This is in green. So the CES letters. And he wanted to know, we started off, DNA analysis concluded that the Native Americans do not originate from the Middle East or from Israel. So why did the church change the following sections of the introduction page to addition to the Book of Mormon shortly after the results were released? So again, you can go, if you have a Book of Mormon like I do, so that's pre-2006, to yours if you got pre-2006. So if you do, great. So go to lds.org under the scriptures and go read the introduction page, and you're going to see that this is correct. This is the pre-2006 change. The Lamanites, and they are the principal ancestors of the American Indians too. Did you see that? The principal. The new edition from 2006 on, the Lamanites, and they are among the ancestors of the Native Americans. Amongst, not principal. Principal means the soul. They are the origin. Amongst means amongst a group of people. The word changed means the whole meaning was changed. So this is a problem. I was raised with the pre-2006 change, the doctrine that they were. The 3 distinct groups are the ancestors. I was taught that. My friends were taught that. My parents, your grandparents, we were all taught that. So this is what science tells us, and this is Spencer Wells, one of the leading top geneticists, and we saw the opening clip from his video, and the link, once again, down in the bottom. So all the time down in the bottom. So what does Spencer Wells have to say? Oh, I don't even need to do that anymore. I got the box bigger.
I'm a geneticist. Toward the end of October, the first 8 men arrived. The first ancestors...
Okay, so as establishing, he's a geneticist. He's one of the leading geneticists. He's giving you the molecular clock and, 12-month calendar clock that scientists use. And he's explaining when man, our first ancestor, came onto the 12-month clock. So calendar.
walk upright. Amazingly, It's not until the 28th of December, nearly the end of the year, that the first fully modern humans arrive on the scene. And even more incredibly, it's not until the 31st of December, New Year's Eve, that they leave Africa to populate the rest of the world.
And by New Year's Day, our ancestors had made it to the furthest corners of the globe.
The farthest corners. The Americas was the last to be inhabited by people. We were if you're from North America and Central and South America, we were the last.
But how could they have made such a journey so suddenly, so swiftly, and so successfully?
Yeah, let's go find out. So if you guys want to watch this, again, the original link's in the bottom. So you can go and watch it. It's almost over 2 hour documentary. So I didn't want this being a 3-hour video. It's going to be close to 2 hours probably. So let's not get that far ahead. So this is starting off on his journey into India and to the Americas.
One branch of Niazov's family reached the Americas. Their children are the Native Americans.
And Kiaza is from Kazakhstan.
From the Inuit to the Incas. To get there, they had to embark on a journey into climatic extremes beyond anything endured before. Remember the Ice Age?
I live in an area that has a lot of remnants of the Ice Age. I don't remember it, but I've seen a lot of its effects.
Well, 20,000 years ago, it was at its most extreme. Somehow, they're better able to cope with the cold.
And this is the ancestors, genetically verified ancestors of the South, Central, and North American Aboriginals and Inuit.
And Nina Jablonski knows why.
The Chukchis are a classic example of what has been referred to in human biology as Bergmann's and Allen's rules.
Bergmann's and Allen's rules. We're going to learn about this. And the funny thing is, we're going to hear from those Native Americans we were talking earlier. They are aware of this. So they're going to tell you about this too.
That is, in a very cold climate, the surface area of the body will be reduced and the length of the appendages will be reduced. So the people tend to have shorter arms and legs, shorter fingers, and a shorter and rounder trunk to reduce the surface area through which heat can be lost.
And yet, our research shows that that's when they headed straight into its bitter heart.
Yep, that is the migration. If you guys want to know more, I have another video out there. I'll link it at the end. In its description, it's got the studies and research papers linked in there. I might link it in this one as well. I'm not sure yet. But you can go find the papers. I have it in another video. And this is where our story of the first wave that came through, the Clovis wave, and we even have another group called the Seleucian, and they are hypothesized to have come across a huge chunk of ice that was formed across the Atlantic, somewhere around France, Spain, and they came across. So, and there's good evidence for those people as well. So we have at least 4 waves that we know of, 3 that came over the Bering Ice Bridge that we're going to hear about in a moment. So let's hear what Spencer has to say more.
Some of them are still there. Niazov's ancient marker shows up in a nomadic tribe deep in the Russian Arctic. They're called the Chukchi, and they're survivors from the Great Migration to the Americas 15,000 years ago. The last stage in the greatest journey ever made could have been completed by only 2 or 3 men and a group of as few as 10 people.
A group as few as 10 people with only 2 to 3 men. Genetic markers say it's only probably 2 to 3 men. It might be a bit more. So, but we know at least 2 to 3 men, and the group was about 10 people, at least 10. And we're going to hear a little bit more on that in a second.
Just 10 extraordinary people.
I say extraordinary. Definitely extraordinary.
Once they got down there, they discovered that there were a lot of big grazing animals all over the place there too. American buffalo, mammoths.
American buffalo and mammoths, and this is important because this is going to be coming up within the Book of Mormon claims, because the Book of Mormon mentions once that there's elephants, and the defense now from Fair, and we're going to get into this, is that there is, the elephants meant mammoths. That's what, and we're going to hear it directly from Fair. So, and it's important. That's why I put this in here, because that's going to be their defense.
All sorts of things. And they kept spreading south, and in about 800 years, they actually got all the way down to South America.
And
did you hear that? In about 800 years after first crossing, they got, so less than 1,000 years, they finally got down to the south, to the southern tip. And this is the Native American view, so of their, what they believe with what they were hearing from Spencer.
everybody around the world is very closely related to each other. We're all part of one big family. In fact, we're all related to people who lived in Africa as recently as 50,000 years ago. Now, the evidence is that the first people...
The evidence, DNA evidence, archaeological evidence.
People who left Africa followed a coastal migration route along the south coast of Asia, and they ended up in Australia. Yep.
And that's the first wave out of our first wave out of Africa. There's 3 waves. That's the first wave.
They're not myths.
Absolutely, that's a very good point.
Okay, and he says they're not myths, this gentleman, because he gives their what's it called? Their legends. I don't want to say myths either. They give their creation legend here. I cut that out. You can go watch the full video. So the full video's there. In his video, he has the timestamps on here, so you can go to the timestamp and watch it near the end here, because this is near the end of his video.
And my bias as a scientist is that I like to see evidence for things.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the first migration out of Africa, according to the genetic results that we found. Now the next one followed a slightly different route, one that went inland.
I'm getting pretty good at this. Of course, it helps that I brought the family album along.
And
Yes, this is one of the leaders in genetic research, Spencer Wells. So yeah, I hope he's getting pretty good at this after doing this documentary. And this is going to be the second wave he's talking about. And listen to what our Aboriginals have to say, our indigenous people. I hate Aboriginal, indigenous.
And this man is a direct descendant of a person who lived in Central Asia about 35 to 40,000 years ago.
Wow.
And the interesting thing to that is he's actually one of my descendants, guaranteed. So guaranteed because 2 of my great-grandmothers are pure blood Mi'kmaq Native American. So indigenous. 2 of my great-grandmothers are pure, so Native American. So that is my ancestry as well, part of my ancestry. I've got Native American, European, and Arabic ancestry. It's a unique story on this one, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so this would be my ancestor as well.
And his ancestor is also the ancestor of most Europeans and Native Americans.
Wow.
He's a man called Niazov, who lives in Kazakhstan.
So you hear that? Not just the natives and the Asians, but also most of the Europeans. So if you're of European descent, good chance this gentleman here is also related, one of your descendants.
Are you the same person that did some research I noticed on the internet?
Are you the same person I noticed did some research on the internet? So, not some, the research on the internet. This gentleman here, Native American tribal member, has heard of this research. And what does Spencer say?
That says that the Native American people are somehow connected to Central Europe.
Yes, Central Asia.
Central Asia.
Yeah, that was a paper that we published last year.
Yeah, so this gentleman here is more than aware of Spencer's work, and hear what he has to say about that.
Okay. That's good to know.
What do you think of that?
I was looking at a book from people from Central Asia, and I saw my cousin Emmett and Abraham, Auntie Grandma Buggy, and I said, my God, I got family over there in Central Asia. These were...
You hear that? He could see his own family members. He's Native American, and he could see his own family members within the Chechnya. So, which are DNA genetically proven to be the ancestors of all the indigenous of the Americas, South, Central, and North, as well as the Inuit.
The Mongolian people.
Yeah. Central Asians.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
These are the Chukchi people, and they're your
They're still
distant
in
cousins.
Siberia.
They're
The
still living
Chukchi
in
people.
northeastern Siberia. I visited them recently.
And we saw that when he was talking about going into the coldest extremes. So that's the Chechnya. So that's the people he's talking about. We saw them.
Oh, they're the ones that have
With the
this
reindeer.
With the reindeer.
reindeer.
Mhm.
I've seen them on TV.
See, it's not like the Native Americans are ignorant people and they're not educated, even without a college. They do watch TV. You saw one gentleman who's done the research on genetics, interested because of what he heard, and he doesn't disagree with it. Listen to this.
Their home is.
Yeah, the home looks like a teepee. And the results show that they are your ancestors. They ultimately made that trip across the Bering Strait into the Americas.
DNA says this. Genetic testing says this. Testing the Native, Central, and South American indigenous people. The DNA of them and the Chechnya, and those people in that region match.
And by looking at the genetic data, we can estimate that as few as 10 or possibly 20 people were in that first group.
So as few as 10 and as high as 20. So somewhere between 10 and 20, and all they needed was 3 males. 3 markers have been found from 3 different males. So far out of that group. So that's why we know out of that group, at least 3 males.
The first wave of migration into the Americas.
My story about the journey of man came as no surprise to these Navajo.
The Navajo. Oh, so now we find out who they're talking about. So the area people, along with the Hopi, of Book of Mormon land. So original Joseph Smith Book of Mormon land, Heartland model Book of Mormon people.
The idea of migration had been central to their own creation story since the beginning of time.
The point is that somehow we're finally acknowledging one another.
We're acknowledging one another because their legend, their stories of creation and how they got there, talk about them migrating, moving.
From the scientific realm and from the traditional realm, saying that, yeah, the puzzle is starting to fit together.
And we complement each other.
And we're all complementing each other.
In the book.
Okay, guys, we're on to topic number 2. Topic number 2. We've established DNA has disproved the Book of Mormon. Disproved the Book of Mormon. What we need to discuss later in another video is the Cherokee. They are the only tribe of every band of Native American that does not match up with the DNA. They do have some Middle Eastern DNA, but they've also got European and African and so the church now tries to claim the Cherokee might be the DNA that's contradictory to their story and science. So we'll get into that because it's itself a video of its own. So because it's fallible, we know where the Cherokee DNA comes from, and part of that is in this video we heard first wave out of Africa. They went through the Middle East, stopped there for a few thousand years, went into India area. And then a group went over into Australia. Second wave followed the same path, cut up into Asia. That's our group. They stopped in the Middle East, cut up into Asia. Thousands of years later, cut down into the Americas. That's part of the DNA. Part of it. So the church claims that they've been assimilated. They've been assimilated in by other cultures, and the DNA markers have been lost for the Lamanites. That, you can read it. It's down at the bottom. I can't spend 2 hours on just this. So let's get into the animals mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Let's get into the animals mentioned. Why are horses mentioned in the Book of Mormon? Let's go back over here. So I'm not even going to deal with, we've already looked at the evidence. This is all just ignorant comments by Jim Bennett. So ignorant comments by Jim Bennett. So let's go here. This is his long and short answer. I'll have his link down there because I'm using his page, so you can go read his answers. So I'm not ignoring Jim. I'm using the same sources he is. I'm not disputing his sources. I'm using his sources. So I'm just not going to give him a line by line. So this was the document I had up on this computer. So Anachronisms. This is covered on a few channels. This is covered by Saints Unscripted. I will put their link in here as well so you can hear what they have to say.
Hey guys, we're going to talk about anachronisms today. An anachronism is something that shows up in a time period in which it isn't believed to have existed. For instance, in the movie Gladiator, you might notice that when this chariot crashes, there's a gas canister in.
Horse, cattle, oxen, sheep, swine, goats, elephants, sea elephants, wheels, chariots, wheat, silk, etc., did not exist in pre-Columbian America during Book of Mormon times. Why are these things mentioned in the Book of Mormon as being made available in the Americas between 22 to 400 BC? Anachronisms. This means something that shouldn't be somewhere in a historical time period that doesn't fit. Such as horses did not exist in the time period of the Book of Mormon, neither did cattle, neither did sheep, neither did elephants, and neither did chariots or horses or wheat.
Over the years, people have drawn much attention to things they view as anachronisms in the Book of Mormon. Things like steel, horses, cement, and stuff like that. So let's talk about it.
So there was some barley, a form of barley, so I will give them credit. We will cover that, and I will give them that credit, and I'm not going to rebuttal that one, but I will rebuttal the wheat part. So this is what we're dealing with right here. This is why we're over here, as we're dealing with number 5 on the CES letters.
Anachronisms.
And what does the church have to say about this?
Let's talk about it.
There are a handful.
And just before we get here, this is fair. This is coming from Fair or Latter-day Saints.
Full of references to horses. This has raised questions because the current understanding is that there were no horses in the Americas before Columbus.
And that's a fallacy. That's a fallacy. There were horses in the Americas pre-Columbus. So horses actually evolved in the Americas. They evolved here in the Americas and they became extinct in America after they migrated through. And we're going to hear this. And what we're about to see is coming from Eons, a scientific channel. So with short documentaries, and I'm stealing clips from their channel here. Link in the bottom so you can watch the full 10-minute, 11-minute documentary. Link in the bottom. So I'm taking clips to show the evolution of the horse, and it's important because tapirs are going to be claimed as horses by the apologists, and we're going to find out how tapirs and horses were about.
Now this unassuming little forest creature might not seem like much, but it gave rise to the most successful family of perissodactyls of all time, the Equidae, the family that includes the modern horse.
Yes, it includes the modern horse. And this is why this is important, because the horse evolved over here and eventually went extinct over here. But we do have an ancestor of the Equidae still living in the Americas and only in the Central South America part.
The height of its diversity, the Equid family would include more than a dozen genera that roam the northern hemisphere. Today, however, only one genus remains, Equus, which includes modern horses, donkeys, and zebras.
And we have that over in the, South Africa area, the Africas.
Thanks to an abundance of fossils found throughout North America, we can reconstruct much of the horse family tree, from the tiny browsing multi-toed Eohippus to the large grazing single-toed Equus.
And the church doesn't deny this. We have a clip coming up, and down in the description, we'll have a link for this. So from their own website.
There are 3 possible ways to approach the question of horses in the Book of Mormon. First, there may be evidence, though currently inconclusive, for horses in pre-Columbian America.
Inconclusive, how convenient. Though inconclusive, no.
Archaeological work unearths surprising new information all the time.
Nothing that we don't know already, and this is what we know.
It's 55 million years ago in North America, and the continent is draped in a canopy of swampy cypress trees and humid broadleaf forests.
And this is important because this is the evolution of 2 of the animals we're going to be dealing with.
Bizarre predators like the hoofed carnivore Mesonyx lurk in the undergrowth, ready to nab an animal called Eohippus. Eohippus may be small, just a half meter tall, but it's also fast and well adapted to its environment. It runs on padded toes, each capped with a cute little hoof, perfect for making a quick getaway on the soft forest floor. But the future has big changes in store for little Eohippus.
Yes, it does.
The climate is about to get cooler and drier, and soon the landscape of North America will become unrecognizable. Trees will give way to vast carpets of grass. Mesonyx and other forest hunters will go extinct.
And this is important because the grassland sustains the mammoth.
And powerful new pack-hunting predators will evolve. To adapt to life on these newly forming plains, the descendants of Eohippus will undergo some dramatic changes. They'll grow...
Oh, I love evolution. I know the church hates evolution. They have no stance anymore, but they hate it. I grew up in an anti-evolution church.
To be over 30 times its size. They'll change their diet entirely, and they'll all start running on one giant toe. In time, these animals will become so successful that they'll spread all over the world, to Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa. But
See, they spread all over the world. Originated in North America, but spread all over the world.
in their native range of North America, they'll vanish for 10,000 years.
For 10,000 years, they will vanish. They go extinct for 10,000 years to post-Columbia times, when the Spanish brought horses back to the Americas. So, and then after they brought them back to the Americas and they left their horses, which became wild, and the Native Americans started using them.
Second is the chance that the Nephites borrowed the word from the Old World and applied it to a similar animal in the
And this is why it was important for me to go through the evolutionary period, because one of these animals comes from that branch.
world. This happens across cultures, like how the North American bison is frequently called a buffalo after the large African animal.
Back at the start of the Eocene epoch, the world was in the clutches of the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, and
this is important.
Warm, damp forest covered the land from pole to pole. This was the environment that gave rise to the very first perissodactyls, hoofed mammals with an odd number of toes. Today they include rhinos, tapirs, and horses.
Rhinos, tapirs, horses. Look at a tapir and a horse. Look at the tapir and the horse, guys. How familiar to each other do they look? How similar? Would you be able to tell the difference? Could you tell the difference between a tapir and a horse if you saw it, and if you were writing about it and you knew what a horse was? And if you knew what a tapir was? So would you call a tapir a horse? I wouldn't. So there's a distinct. Tapir looks closer to the rhino than it does to the horse. Holy camole. And this is, and the link down here, this is a official site, and they talk about what a tapir is. So we're going to quickly just play through. This is I'm highlighting. So their closest relatives are rhinos and horses. So they've been around since the Eocene, 50 to 34 million years ago. They are South America's largest native animal. Tapirs are found in the forests of Central and South America as well as Southeast Asia. That's what that says.
The intriguing animal you're gazing at this very moment. You may never have seen this animal before, but it's been here longer than we humans have.
Longer than we humans have. So that means they were here before the Jaredites ever came over here, or the Mulekites, or the Nephites, the Lamanites, Lehi's family. They were here before the Ice Age Paleo people got here.
Its ancestors have been around for 35 million years.
And this is a tapir. To the LDS Church, this is what the Book of Mormon mentions are horses. This is what the church is saying are horses. It's horse shit. And here's the links. This is LDS.org. This is LDS, not LDS.org, fair, LatterdaySaints.org. So, and the rebuttal to the CES Letter's claims. So, and they talk about, like sheep and goat, the horse and ass are very closely related mammals. So we're not going to get into blah blah, the genus and all that. They don't disagree. They come from the Paleocene in North America, including Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica, Middle America. So let's go over here. Meso means middle in Greek. This research has confirmed that the equid and the mammoth fossils are the most abundant types of vertebrate fossils in the late Paleocene. So they're not disagreeing with this. The late Paleocene, which is over 10,000 years ago. Over. The historical fossil history of the horse and ass shows that this animal was most numerous and varied in North America, and died out 10,000 years before the new Common Era, BC. 10,000 years ago, it died out in the Americas. So it has not been satisfactorily explained why, after so much success here, they likely became extinct. So they just don't tell you. You could go more and read, because they go back, here, and you can see. Some researchers have suggested that references to the horses in the Book of Mormon can refer to other animals in the land of promise that had characteristics that in certain ways resembled that of a horse or an ass. So this is where they end up getting into the tapir. This is where they started saying the tapir. So we go over here, and links in the description. I look for the tapir. I type in the search. This is the results. So a tapir's indicated. Another early explorer in describing tapirs indicated they are as big as a small cow and have no horns. So, like an ass, a description of a tapir seen in Chupis. So in Chupis is going to be important. Chupis is going to be very important when it comes to no archaeological evidence of the Book of Mormon. So what are we getting ourselves into? Issue after issue that the church cannot resolve. So they cannot resolve it because they're full of shit over it.
The third is the possibility that during the translation process, the word horse was used in place of another unfamiliar word.
Why would a horse be unfamiliar? They knew what tapirs were. They had already known what tapirs were. The Spanish wrote about tapirs, so we knew what a tapir was. So why would Smith not use unknown animal? Why would he use horse instead of, rhino, since they look closer to a rhino than a horse? You saw the picture.
Although there are still some unanswered questions, they can be launching pads for deeper learning.
So we're going to excuse that we don't know. So Book of Mormon Central is going to excuse that we don't know, and we're going to justify with 3 possible explanations that just don't work, and there's still holes. They're saying even though there's holes, we got to do what?
As opposed to being a stumbling block.
We got to make it a positive. Here, let's see more. I'm going to just jump. Let's see more. I'm running out of time before I have to leave for work and do this at lunch.
It's called the mountain cow. Although it's not a cow, it's really related to the horse and the rhinoceros.
But unlike their predecessors, species of equus didn't stay confined to North America. 3 million years ago, they crossed into South America as part of the Great American Biotic Interchange.
Tapirs. They became tapirs. They evolved tapirs.
Tapirs have a rubbery, highly flexible nose. Perfect for eating leaves, fruit, and aquatic vegetation.
Horses don't have rubbery noses.
And about 500,000 years after that, they crossed the Bering Strait land bridge to spread into Asia, Europe, and Africa. During this time, all of the 3-toed horses and most other monodactyls died out. Then, about 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene,
11,700 years ago, the end of the Pleistocene. I believe the church says, where was it, versus, no, okay. If we go back to my video I had up earlier, you can see where they, it's in the description, links in the description, you can go read it. They talk about the Pleistocene and admitting it died off in Pleistocene. The Pleistocene ended 11,700 years ago. Ended that long ago. So they died off shortly after that. So way, way, way before the Book of Mormon time period. Way thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Most of North America's large mammals, including equus, went extinct. Now there's a big healthy scientific debate going on about what caused this extinction event, but it's safe to say that it was probably a combination of factors.
Yes. No doubt that it happened and when, but why? So what about elephants? Why are elephants in the Book of Mormon?
The elephant is mentioned only once in the Book of Mormon, in Ether 9:19, and need not have survived in the Americas past about 2400 BC. While the jury is still out, there are a number of North American Indian traditions.
Alright, before he gets on and dribbling, we are finally here to the elephants. Elephant is mentioned in the Book of Mormon. They try to call it a mammoth. They try to manipulate it to fit to a mammoth, and that just is not going to work, and this is why.
Which recount legends of giant stiff-legged beasts which would never lie down.
And he's describing
big head and large leaf-like ears, round footprints, forward-bending knees, and a 5th appendage coming out of its head. Scientists agree that mammoths and mastodons inhabited the Americas.
Well, yeah, they did. They inhabited the Americas. They looked similar to that, but they had hair, and yeah, they had snouts. But they're not elephants. Mastodons aren't elephants.
The woolly mammoth was around for maybe 500,000 years or more. And for much of that time, it was overlapping with humans.
And an article in Scientific Monthly.
And an article in Scientific Monthly, and we're going to be going over that. But do you think Joseph Smith and those people knew the difference between an elephant and a woolly mammoth? Just asking you, do you think they knew the difference between an elephant and a woolly mammoth? Oh, why am I going back over here?
Titled,
you guys can see over in this corner.
Elephants in America, suggests that these proboscidean animals, which are elephants, mastodons, or mammoths, may have survived in the Americas until about 1000 BC.
Incorrect. That's not true. So we know when they went extinct. We know where the last of the fossils are and dating. He is trying to stretch this and lie to you guys. Outright lying. So this guy is outright lying to you. So let's hear what real science says, not Mormon apologetics.
It was a very successful species until it finally went extinct just a few thousand years ago.
Well within the time demanded by the Book of Mormon.
He generally uses the term a few thousand. It's more than a few thousand. And we're going to find out. So he's stretching here.
According to Dr. John Sorensen,
Professor John Sorensen, Professor of Anthropology at BYU, University of Brigham Young University. So a Mormon, so how reliable?
Mastodon remains have been dated by radiocarbon to about 5000 BC in Florida.
Okay, 5000 BC in Florida. So according to the Book of Mormon, it's 2200 BC when they came over here. It's still half the time period they've been extinct by that date.
Around the Great Lakes to about 4000 BC.
1600, 1800 years before the Book of Mormon time periods, Jaredites, 1400, or 1200, sorry.
In the Mississippi Valley to near 3300 BC, perhaps to near...
And notice I have up here, 3 out of the 4 dates way past the dates acceptable for the Jaredites. So 3 of the 4 he's mentioned, and the other one isn't confirmable.
100 BC in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it sites in Alaska and Utah dating around 5000 BC.
How did the woolly mammoths die out? And we're not going to just hear how, but when.
On this map we've plotted every mammoth fossil that we can date, and it shows first of all the huge range of the species right across Europe.
Okay, so this is all the fossils they've been able to date for mammoths. All the fossils they've dated, including supposedly the Sorensen.
Across northern Asia and into North America. But then, starting about 14,000 years ago, the mammoth range had started to contract. The last mammoth survived only on a couple of islands in the Arctic Ocean.
On a couple of islands in the Arctic Ocean. So only a few survived on islands. And how long ago?
And they died out there about 4,000 years ago.
About 4,000 years ago they died out. So 2200 is when supposedly the Jaredites came over. They were dead thousands of years before the Jaredites came over.
As with the discovery of post-Pleistocene horses, or horse bones, mastodon bones, which can be dated after the Pleistocene period.
Yes, they can, because the Pleistocene ended 11,700 years ago. 11,700 years ago is the Pleistocene's end. So, mammoths went extinct 4,000 BC. So,
about 10,000 years ago, demonstrate that small pockets of these animals survived the general extinction and may have survived to Jaredite times.
May have. They are stretching. Arctic Ocean, 4,000 years ago, is where the last of the mastodons were. So 10,000 years ago, horses died out on the North American continent. Horses. All right, let's keep on moving on here. Let's not spend too much time on this.
The last mammoth survived only on a couple of islands in the Arctic Ocean, and died out there about 4,000 years ago, and after that, they were gone.
And what about barley and wheat? Okay, we're going to give these guys the barley. Thumbs up, you guys finally got the barley. You got something, you got the barley.
Until recently, the critics were sure that barley and wheat were unknown in the ancient New World. An article in Science 83, however,
barley is debatable on what type of barley, but it was barley. So we'll give them that debatable what type, but we'll give it to them.
Revealed that pre-Columbian domesticated barley had been discovered by archaeologists at an ancient Hohokam Indian site in Arizona. The non-LDS author of this article suggested that the barley might have been imported from Mexico at a very early date.
And I love how he says the non-LDS scientist. When he mentioned Sorensen, who works for BYU, he didn't mention that he was an LDS scientist. So he just says scientist. He doesn't say where Sorensen works, BYU. But it's very convenient when it's a non-LDS person, he'll mention that.
It is interesting that Alma 63, 6-10 describes various Nephite migrations to the north. It is possible that such migrations, and other similar ancient Mesoamerican migrations, might have influenced North American cultures and crops.
Possible. Not without, reason. We know the Polynesians were influenced with tuber roots. There's evidence of tuber roots coming from South America over into the Polynesian islands. So thousands of years ago, very possible. Not going to dispute that. But one of the problems is when we come to the wheat and their explanation why we can't find wheat and what wheat may have been, it falls apart.
To the surprise of many.
And not only, to the surprise of many, you'll be surprised, and not only does it fall apart, he's an outright liar.
The find at the Hohokam site in Arizona was a first because it yielded cultivated or domesticated barley.
And we'll show you where he's a liar.
Biologist Howard Stutz explains that, quote, 3 types of wild barley have long been known to be native to the Americas, end quote. Furthermore, scholars now report that other examples of what might be domesticated barley have been found in eastern Oklahoma and southern Illinois.
Not really.
Dating from 1
questionable of his barley.
900 AD. It is also possible that real wheat was present during Book of Mormon times.
No, and this is where we're going to catch him as a flat-out liar.
It has since disappeared.
It's since disappeared? But the barley didn't, but wheat did. Listen to that. Barley never disappeared, but wheat did.
When the Spanish arrived in the New World in the 16th century, for example, Bishop Landa wrote that they had helped the Indians to raise European millet.
Did you hear that? They helped. He's saying, according to the Spanish, they helped the natives raise mullet. So it could be another word for corn wheat.
Which grew remarkably well in the area.
When Europeans first arrived in
Actually, let's go back. And he said, what? Let's hear his last words before we go to that clip.
In the area.
Oh, when actually, hold on. Let's go back.
Arizona was a first because it yielded cultivated or domesticated barley.
Sorry,
that,
guys.
Quote, 3 types of wild barley have long been known to be native to the Americas, end quote. Furthermore, scholars now report that other examples of what might be domesticated barley have been found in eastern Oklahoma and southern Illinois, dating from 900 AD. It is also possible that real wheat was present during Book of Mormon times.
So he says it's possible.
But has since disappeared. When the Spanish arrived in the New World,
listen,
in the 16th century, for example, Bishop Landa wrote that they had helped the Indians to raise European millet, which grew remarkably well in the area.
Let's see if he's truthful or lying to us.
When Europeans first arrived in America, they shunned the strange plant. Many even believed it was the source of physical and cultural differences between them and the Mesoamericans. However, their attempts to cultivate European crops in American soil quickly failed.
They quickly failed. They weren't successful. You can find many more documentaries that'll say the exact same thing, textbooks or YouTube videos. all say the same thing. He is a liar. Straight out liar. He's an apologetic. He's trying to defend their stance, and he is lying there. Lying.
4 centuries later, however, botanists were unable to find even a trace of the millet that
I wonder why they couldn't find a trace, but they could find the trace of barley. I wonder why.
Landa had written about.
Attempts to cultivate European crops in American soil quickly failed.
Quickly failed. That's why there's no crops, because there was never crops that succeeded here. Not European crops. So corn was brought across to the European continent, and we'll find that out. It didn't get brought here.
It is also possible that Book of Mormon wheat referred to something similar but different than what we know as wheat. In America, for instance, corn refers to maize.
Yes, corn, maize. Where did we get the word maize from? We got that from the Spanish. So describe the corn.
But in England, it once meant wheat, and in Scotland, oats. A recent study of amaranth, an old
Amaranth, and we're going to see what amaranth is in a second, guys. Science is going to talk about it, so let's catch them in lie number 2.
The world grain, which was used like wheat.
Hold on here,
A recent study of amaranth, an old world grain which was used like wheat in pre-Columbian America, has led some scholars to conclude that the grain was brought to the New World by ship.
And the settlers were forced to expand their diet.
And the settlers were forced. We know corn, maize, as we know corn was originated here. It is not a European. No one believes that. Do you hear the bullshit lie that he just propagated? It's a bullshit lie.
Finding the crop to their taste, maize soon crossed the Atlantic, where its ability to grow in diverse climates made it a popular grain in many European countries.
It went from the Americas to Europe and the rest of the world. Twice we caught him in a major lie.
Nearly 9,000 years ago, corn, also called maize, was first domesticated from teosinte, a grass native to Mesoamerica.
Teosinte, here we go. This is where he claims this is the same grass.
In ancient times. Amaranth, which is not unlike wheat, could have been the wheat mentioned in the Book of Mormon.
As
same shit.
Maize spread throughout the Americas, it took on an important role, with multiple indigenous societies revering a corn mother as the goddess who created agriculture.
And we don't hear about no goddess mothers in the Book of Mormon, so none of the people talk about any cultures who worship goddess mothers. We don't hear of any cultures that are even remotely resemble these people for their worship of deities. Oh, let's go.
This is where we came up from the ground. In other words, we were birthed into this place. Just
birthed into this place.
Like we are all birthed by our mother.
Why don't we know about any other Book of Mormon cultures that talk about the maize, real maize, gods based off of this? We don't have that because Joseph Smith did not know about any of this. So this was all new at his time.
Culture.
Across Mesoamerica, the Aztecs depended on maize, aka corn, as their staple crop. They also grew a lot of beans and squash, as well as tomatoes, avocados, chilies, tubers, and root vegetables.
So, you see, that's what one of the Mesoamerican societies used. Corn and tubers. Let's see what we have here.
While women worked domestically, men typically worked in the fields, known as milpas. And that was no easy task, considering ancient Mayans didn't use animals like horses or oxen.
So they worked in the fields. They did the same type of grain, so which is corn and not wheat, corn grain, not wheat, and they didn't have any animals to help them. They did all the tilling themselves. So why the oxen? What was the oxen used for? What oxen or beasts of burden to till?
To help them tend to crops. Farming was all done by the brute force of man's own hand.
By the force of man's own hand. And if we switch over, let's fade.
Was all done by...
Look at this. We have oxen. Oxen. brought over by the Spanish, post-Columbian. So the Columbian days, after the pre-Columbian. So Joseph Smith didn't know that.
The brute force of man's own hand.
What about the wheel, guys? What about the wheel? And we're going to see how deceitful these guys are.
Because the Book of Mormon mentions chariots, most people immediately imagine that such a device was wheeled.
Are chariots not wheeled? True or false? Are chariots not wheeled? You go and look at any picture of a chariot from any period of time, they are all wheeled.
The wheel, however, is not mentioned in the Book of Mormon, other than figuratively.
Yes, it's not mentioned in the Book of Mormon. And it's also not in Mesoamerica, as they are claiming.
In the Isaiah passages, such as 2 Nephi 15:28. When the Spaniards arrived, the Native Americans seemed unfamiliar with the wheel.
Because the wheel never existed in North America, South America, or Central America culture. So they carried by person or by animal.
Archaeologists, however, have found over 100 examples of wheeled artifacts in the Americas.
They do, and you're going to see the paper in a few minutes. You will see the paper.
Most of which are pre-Columbian wheeled toys from Central America. Many of these were attached to the toys in different ways. This would suggest that the early Mesoamericans had some experience with axles and wheels.
Toy-wise, yeah, of course. We found the evidence. Do we have evidence of carts? Do we have evidence of chariots? No, no carts, no chariots. So do we have evidence of carts and chariots in Europe and in the Middle East and in Africa and in Asia from that time period of the Book of Mormon, from 2200 on to the end of their civilization, about 700 AD CE? Sure do. We have it everywhere else but where it's claimed. So everywhere else but, and let's go further.
If small toy-like objects had been fitted with wheels, it is impossible to think that the early Americans would not have understood the benefit of larger wheeled items such as carts.
This dude's a little on crack, huh?
In all cultures, are models of larger objects that work on the same principles.
Well, hold on here, guys. Look at this over here. He pretty much read what was in the article. He stated as if he's giving you authority. He's just repeating what's in this article. So you go, the article is in the bottom of the description. I got the article down here in the description. As always, articles all links are in the description. Let's look more. So I highlight all this. You can see this is what he's just repeated to you. And I think I gave this about a minute clip. Oh, maybe it's a bit further in. If you go down further in the article, if you go down, I have it highlighted. I highlighted it here. So it must be coming up. I actually have their explanation. It must be after this clip right here. So let's see. So why does the Book of Mormon refer to chariots when it's known that there were no wheeled vehicles in ancient America? This is fair. This is Fair's website. We do not know what type of chariots the Nephites used, nor do we know if what they call chariots had wheels. Read that. Read that. Come on, guys. Any chariot you ever saw have wheels? Any chariot you ever heard of had wheels? They all have wheels. Carts and chariots have wheels. That's why they were invented, to pull people around on a wheeled vehicle. So, the nature of chariots is not clear in the Book of Mormon text. The text nowhere states that wheels were part of these devices. Because we know wheels belong on a chariot. Are we going to say that there's no reins on a chariot? So we know there's reins on a chariot to, to control the animal that's pulling it. We know that there's axles on there to hold and turn the cart with the movement of the animal. That's not mentioned on there with the chariot, but we know that's part of the chariot. Come on, you're playing friggin' semantics, guys. You're playing friggin' semantics here. Nothing but pure semantics. So we're going to be going on here in a second. Let's pop over here. I gave you guys a chance to read it, so I'm going to just go here.
Is from.
Let's listen to a chariot expert. We're going to listen to a chariot expert in a second here.
One we have is from. I'm not even going to try to say that. In modern Russia and Kazakhstan from around 2000 BCE.
Around 2000 BCE. Oh, so around the time of the Tower of Babel, around the time of the Jaredites, there is a example. They found one that old, and what else? What else?
The oldest true chariot we can say we have found. Though there are pictures of a chariot-like device in Mesopotamia about 500 years earlier.
So 3,000 years ago, they found two chariots, 22,000 and 2,500 BC. So Mesopotamia.
It's shaky. Somewhere in the Mesopotamian region, possibly into Eastern Europe, as we have found some fairly old wheels, or something that they at least resemble wheels, in Eastern Europe slightly earlier. So we're a bit of an argument over who's got the oldest chariot.
So we know who's got that. The chariots go that back. They have what resemble wheels. We know there's nothing that resembles wheels used on any of those type of structures from the Mesoamerica, South America, or North America period. So, and this is what the Book of Mormon has to say, or Fair has to say. This is their examples. Let's just sit back and see the highlights coming up here. I'm going to highlight every example, horses associated with travel and chariots. This is BYU or Fair. So guys, this is fair.ldsorg.com. Once again, down in the description, you will find the link for it. You can go check yourself. Ammon was preparing his horses and his chariots. Now that King Lamoni heard that Ammon was preparing his horses and his chariots, he was more astonished. More astonished. Preparing his horses and his chariots. Preparing to pull the chariots with the horses. What do chariots get pulled with? Horses and wheels. You get that, guys. So Alma 8:12. So let's see. Ammon had made ready the horses and the chariots for the king and his servants. For his king and his servants. Come on, guys. Chariots are pulled by horses and wheels. So Alma 20:26, make ready his horses and his chariots. Horses and chariots. We're playing semantics when they say we don't know what chariots were and horses might have been something else than what they are. They're clearly not, and this is why we have problems. Major problems. And let's look at what more is being said here. Here I'm trying to find where the heck that thing was. And their chariots. And they had taken their horses and their chariots. So this is about the only one you can play real semantics with. Real semantics, because it doesn't associate the horses being pulled by the chariots. It's just saying they took horses and chariots. Again, how do you move the chariot? By horse on wheel. So let's read what they say down here. It should be noted that we are not told if these chariots served a purpose in riding, or if they were for transporting goods, or if they had a ceremonial function. Do you hear what they're trying to claim? This is ridiculous, guys. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh, here we go. I'm going to go back over. This is the domesticated horses again. And remember where we heard the apologist talking about the toys, and I showed you where he was reading from? In the article, if you go down further, and the article is coming right here. This is the same article, just a bit further down. Other authors take technological innovations as a technological process. In the same dialogue, headed by Casso, this is one of the people on this paper, Sterling suggests a notion of technology that is exclusively focused on efficiency and progress. He states, "It seems unbelievable that having known for 5 centuries the principle of the wheel, no one would have thought of using it more generally. It is more acceptable to assume that by relying on human locomotion and being constrained by the limitations of the terrain, they did not realize its value as a practical means of improving transportation." Did you see the apologist say that? No, he cherry-picked the top part about the toys. Yes, you got roads that they walk on. You got houses. Little toys can be rolled on the roads easily, so they can be played with easily. But when you're trying to transport goods and you're trying to transport services, that doesn't work. They never thought of that. In this same article they're citing, they totally omit the next part and further down. The atheist apostate didn't. Hell no, I didn't. So it's, you guys should know this stuff. You need to know this stuff. They cherry-picked it. This is what really happened. Transportation was by foot or canoe. This is how they really went.
To get some blisters on your feet if you had to get around the way the ancient Mayans did. Cities were connected through a system of paved roads, or sakbiab, which were raised above ground, sometimes as high as 8 feet. And since the Mayans didn't use animals to help move goods, slaves had to carry everything on foot, often in large slave chains.
They had to carry on. They had to carry on foot or by slave trains, not wheel cart, not a cart, by foot and slave train, in slave trains.
To get to more remote areas, the Mayans traveled by canoes that were sometimes 50 feet in length.
By canoes, if they could not do it by foot, it was inaccessible by foot, they used canoe for the rest of it. And we're going to see how another culture did it too.
If having no writing was tricky, imagine what it was like building huge stone cities on the tops of mountains with no wheels. Yeah.
With no wheels. And I'm going to switch over here. We see a llama. This is supposedly a sheep. According to the Book of Mormon apologists, sheep become llamas. Sheep become llamas and bighorns. They become bighorn sheep and llamas. We know that's not so.
The Inca hauled everything up those mountains with llamas and people.
With llamas and people. With llamas and people. Not by cart, not by chariot, so not by horse, not by tapir, so which we heard is their explanation for a horse in the Book of Mormon. Every time you hear a horse, imagine a tapir, because that's what the church is saying was probably a tapir. So that's what they're claiming, pulled, these chariots and carts. Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. Let's hear from a person that's in the field of archaeology.
Eventually found the story of the founder, an archaeological foundation that continues to work in Mexico. A man named Thomas Stewart Ferguson.
Thomas Stewart Ferguson at the time was a believing, devout LDS member.
Who was a Mormon and a lawyer in California. He never trained in archaeology, but when he was an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley in the 30s, he became really interested in Mesoamerica and how it related to the Book of Mormon. And he particularly became interested in testing some ideas about where the Book of Mormon took place.
He was interested in testing. Earlier in the video, we will see that some of the areas that they are using for excavations turns out to be this location. So for the Mormon defense, when they say they found excavation bones in Mesoamerica for mammoths and horses, this would be the area.
And so he started this archaeological foundation called the New World Archaeological Foundation that is headquartered in Chiapas even today.
That's true.
And is now under the umbrella of BYU, which is the Mormon University.
So it's under the umbrella of the LDS Church, who owns BYU, Brigham Young University, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so far, most of our pro-LDS comments has been coming from professors from this university. This is the first time we have someone talking to BYU about BYU who is not from BYU. So what do they have to say? Let's hear what she has to say.
Ferguson, went down to Mesoamerica several times to sort of look for these artifacts. Throughout the 50s, he was very optimistic that proof of the Book of Mormon was about to be discovered literally any day. That never happened. It didn't happen during his life, and it hasn't happened since.
And remember, it's his organization, his foundation that he founded, and his work that he was down there that has put this area as the place of Mesoamerica of most interest to the church. So this is down in here too. This video is down in here too. So let's hear what one of the general authorities had to say.
There has never been anything yet set forth that definitively settles that question. So the church says we are just waiting until we discover the truth. We do not offer any definite solution.
Yeah, Jesus, they're never getting that truth because there is no truth. Jesus just said there's no truth to it.
As you study the Book of Mormon, keep these things in mind and do not make definite statements concerning things that have not been proven in advance to be true.
Do not make definite statements and things that they have not proven true yet, because Jesus hasn't told them yet.
So what's special about the New World Archaeological Foundation is that from the time it was founded by Ferguson, really, it focused on a region and on a time period that scientists really hadn't been that interested in. And that
scientists have not been that interested in. Only the LDS scientists were interested in that area at that time. Go watch this full video. It's not that long.
Region is sort of the middle and the Pacific coast of Chiapas. In the northern part of Chiapas, there are amazing Mayan pyramids, beautiful glyphs, beautiful ruins, just incredible cities. But in the center and sort of the southern coast of Chiapas, you don't really get that.
We don't really get that. What do we get?
This region was particularly important right after 2000 BC.
So around the time of the Jaredites, this would be around the time of the Jaredites, and one of the reasons the church is interested in this area.
Time period, which is called the formative period, it's right when people start settling down in villages after being hunter-gatherers.
So why in that area do we not find chariots and carts and any of these claim toys in different areas that we do find? So why don't we find any steel-like weapons? Why don't we find any great civilization and culture in the hundreds of thousands?
But the archaeology, especially compared to like the ruins of Maya cities, had been considered not that exciting because it's a lot of earthworks, a lot of very early.
You know, and this, guys, hey, Heartland model opponents, here's your chance to jump in. Heartland model opponents, this is your chance to jump in. This isn't anything like the Book of Mormon told us with temples and grand cities and gold and adornments.
Ceramics. So as this foundation and WAF directed many really large-scale excavation in the 50s and 60s. The key sites are Chiapa de Corzo and Izapa. And thanks to them, we really know a lot about the beginnings of civilization in Mesoamerica and, a region that turned out to be a very interesting crossroads for a bunch of different.
So with everything that we've gone through here in this video, and we barely even scratched the surface on issues and things in the Book of Mormon, we have been able to establish through the agriculture that we've seen, through the animals that have been described, through artifacts, and we're not even getting hardcore into artifacts. We cover chariots because of horses, and we've never found a chariot or anything resembling a chariot in Meso, South, or North America in the pre-Columbian days. So with that excluded out of there, we had to mention the chariot because of horses, which were tapirs, and elephants, which were mammoths. So that breaks down. They do not have it set up. Joseph Smith screwed himself up there. He didn't know about this stuff. Then we keep on moving back. Let's move back. We stopped with the archaeology. Let's move back. So after we've dealt with the horses, we have to deal with the DNA claims. Those are extremely damaging. There's no way around it. That's why they had to change the Book of Mormon intro from the principal ancestors to a remnant of amongst the remnant. So they had to change the narrative because DNA absolutely proves them wrong. And if that isn't enough for you, Joseph Smith, when he's telling you about his Jaredites, Mulekites, and his, we'll call them Nephite Lamanites, he can't even keep his order of events from when they happened in line. So we have the Mulekites and Lehi's family leaving Jerusalem around the same time, roughly arriving over in the New Americas, let's say Mesoamerica for the sake of argument. So arriving in Mesoamerica within a year or two, roughly, because if you're leaving and crossing the ocean, you're not taking, even if it's a different route, it's only going to be a few months, difference. So we'll say a year, even a few years difference. And in that time, they went from a small little bunch of settlers into a large city, into several cities, one of them being Coriantumr. And 3 years after they get there, a Jaredite king by the same name of Coriantumr. Never had a clue of each other. Coriantumr is not a biblical name, found nowhere in the Old Testament, nowhere in the New Testament. It is strictly Book of Mormon. So, and you're trying to tell me that a king of the same name that had a city founded after the Mulekites? So, yeah, I'm not... With everything we piece together, CES Letters nails it. They have a valid claim. I threw in Jim Bennett's, paper in there, so you guys can see that we're into 2 issues now, and he does nothing but slander. I use his sources. I use LDS Fair, Book of Mormon Central for my sources. I use the church's own pages for my sources. I'm not using too many outside sources. Mine is scientists, and none of them are talking about the Mormon Church. They're all talking about something unrelated to religion, and it does not confirm with what the church says. You guys make up your own mind. I'm not here to convince you one way or the other. I know how strong the evidence is. I know how supportive it is that the Book of Mormon is not true. If you want to still believe in it, that's up to you. No one's here to pressure you. We're just here to be transparent and show you the fallacies. If you want to believe them, all up to you. So, I'm not going to try to persuade you one way or another. That is not the way I go. That is not my style, and that's not my motivation for here. My motivation is to be transparent, to let you guys know and see what it is out there, and to let you guys make up your mind. So, and if that's what you guys choose to do, then that's what you guys choose to do. I'm totally fine with that. So, until the next time, this is the AA here. Hope you guys got something out of it. Tune in to the next episode of The Atheist Apostate. Keep it real. Peace out. See you later.